All right, good evening. It is now 6:30 on June 12th, and we'll go ahead and get this started. So as authorized by section 551071 of the Texas Government Code, this meeting may be convened into closed executive session for the purpose of seeking confidential legal advice from the city attorney on any agenda item herein. The City of Rowlett Board of Appeals reserves the right to reconvene, recess, or realign the regular session or call executive session or order of business at any time prior to adjournment. There is a process for public input. If you're not able to attend in person, you may complete the citizens input form on the city's website by 3:30 p.m. the day of the meeting. All forms will be forwarded to the Board of Appeals prior to the start of the meeting. For in-person comments, registration forms, instructions are available inside the door of the City Council chambers. So at this time, we'll call the meeting to order. It is 6:31. At this time, we'll open the floor for citizens input. You have 3 minutes to comment and will be taken by the audience on any topic. No action can be taken by the board during citizens input. Do you have anyone who'd like to come and speak? Nope. All right. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. And we need to consider approval of the minutes of the Board of Appeals meeting on April 10th, 2024. We have a motion to approve the minutes.
I motion to approve the minutes.
There's a second. All right. We'll now vote on the minutes.
The vote is not cast in.
Show me the yes votes.
Okay. All right, the minutes pass. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, individual consideration. Item 4A, conduct a public hearing and take action on a request by David Pregi on behalf of the property owners David E. and Teresa L. George for variance to section 37-302B1D9G of the Rowlett Development Code to reduce the setback requirement for telecommunication antennas 49.5 feet to 21 feet on the northern property line. Property zone single-family residential SF9 district. Subject property is located at 7901 Shrady Road, approximately 230 feet northwest of the intersection of Martha Lane and Shrady Road, being part of the SA and MGRR abstract 1416 page 765 of the City of Rowlett, Dallas County, Texas.
Good evening, board members. My name is Martin Mares. I'll be presenting this item tonight. So some background on this property. It is zoned SF9, and it's approximately 2.65 acres. It does have it's on Martha Lane, even though it has a Shrady Road address, but they're highlighted in the red is what the property we are talking about tonight. So just some background when it comes to the cell towers on this site. On the right-hand side, I provided an older aerial just so you have an idea of some of the background. In September of 1994, AT&T did sign an agreement with the City of Rowlett for lease and space for the antenna space on the Martha Lane Tower. And within this aerial, you can kind of see towards that northern portion, there was a water tower there where essentially is where they had their towers at one point. And they also had a co-location on Metro PCS in 2005. In December 26 of 2015, the water tank was severely damaged due to a tornado, and later demolished, prompting AT&T to put what they would call COWs, which would be cell towers on wheels. And there's 2 existing out there and have been since such day, and now they're trying to go about the process around there. So just some things to consider for the request. Section 77301 of the Rowlett Development Code allows telecommunication facilities in the single-family SF9 as a special use permit. That is not the request tonight, but it's something that they would have to go if the board were to approve it. All towers and structures must be set back from the property lines from any adjacent use by a distance of equal the height of the tower. However, there is an exception where depending if there's an engineered breakpoint, then you can have a setback based on that breakpoint, and then you would just multiply by 110% of that. Essentially, what they would be requesting would be a 90-foot tower, which the breakpoint would be at 45 feet, which then would result in a 49.5-foot setback from the property line. This tower is set basically 21 feet from the property line, so the request would be to reduce the setback to 21 feet for the northern property line. So some discussion on this. The intent is for the setbacks to consider the fall distance of any collapsed sections in order to prevent encroaching upon neighboring properties and any damage to basically structures that are on site. Based on what they have provided us, there would be some encroachment into the northern property shown there on the image to the right. Additionally, I believe it would fall under the shed towards the bottom as well. And the fall zone would encroach essentially to both of those, and something to consider during deliberation. Some things to consider for the variance is that Section 781B of the Rowlett Development Code defines a variance as an exemption from the literal terms of zoning ordinance that avoids any unnecessary hardships caused by special conditions associated with the property. The hardships are unique to the property, arising from topographical, geographical, physical, or dimensional features of the property, and not to the owner or the occupant. A variance is appropriate in unique circumstances to allow limited exceptions from setbacks, lot width, lot depth, lot coverage, floor area, sidewalk, home size, and essentially what they would be requesting within that would be for the setbacks today. And it shall not be granted if based on market condition, economic factors, profitability, marketability, feasibility of development on the property. A variance shall not be granted if it is contrary to the public interest, and if granted, it should meet the spirit of the regulations. So that's some things to consider when taking action on this. The board may recommend modifications to the applicant's request, and the final action may not exactly mirror the applicant's request for the variances section. Staff recommendation is disapproval of the request to reduce the setback from 49.5 feet to 21 feet on the northern property line. The fall zone would encroach into a neighboring property to the north and into a shed with the potential to cause damage to the property. I am available for questions, and the applicant is here as well if they have any questions for them.
I'd like to open it up now for any questions before we bring the applicant up to discuss. Any questions? Good, no questions? Now we can bring the applicant up to let them speak.
Good evening. My name is Mason Griffin, and I reside at 4908 Spyglass Drive in Dallas. And I'm here representing the applicant. First, I just want to thank you guys for coming up here this evening. I always feel guilty when we're the only item on the agenda and have to drag everyone up here to consider these kind of items, and so it is appreciated. Staff did an excellent job of summarizing this case, and especially the history of it. What happened in 2019 when the tornado went through was tragic because, of course, the tenants, AT&T, it said Metro PCS, I believe, but it's T-Mobile now, the two tenants that will be on the tower that we're proposing. When carriers go on towers that go water tank, the assumption is, and the hope is, that structure is going to be there for generations. That's what the city hopes for. It's in the best interest of everyone. So those are often the most reliable locations in which to install antennas. So when that tornado went through in 2019, or 2015, it presented a real problem for everyone. And in fact, when these antennas are installed on a water tank, the entire rest of the network of antennas for the carriers is designed based on the assumption that that installation is going to be there. And so it creates real problems when it goes down because it impacts not just the immediate area, but has a waterfall cascading effect into other sites. Just to provide a little more background and color on this, for several years, as I understand it, the city considered whether or not to rebuild the tower, but ultimately decided not to. The city was kind enough to allow AT&T and T-Mobile to install the temporary installations that have literally been up there ever since and currently sit on the property. Two sets of towers, and I'm sure you're familiar with them, big clutter of the landscape and are not terribly attractive, especially equipment on the ground. And so the hope is that we can replace that with a single tower and an enclosed space on the ground that's more permanent in nature. Really, because that tower was constructed, as far as I can tell, at least as far back as 1985, you guys might know how long it's actually been there, but at least 40 years, there's really always been a tower at this location. First the water tank, and for the past 7 years, the 2 temporary towers that are part of the landscape. And so our hope is by installing one tower, we'll actually make the location more visibly appealing. At some point, the city decided it wasn't going to reconstruct the tower and was going to leave the property vacant. As you know, the property immediately to the north where we're approaching it on is owned by the city, and the city controls it. And so at that point, the AT&T and T-Mobile started the search for other locations in which to install permanent structures. That search has gone on from 2019 to the present, and they have exhausted really every possible option that exists. There's been conversation going on for the past really 5 years with the city, in fact, dealing with multiple members of city staff, some of whom are no longer here and have moved on, others that are still here and have looked at, as I understand it, 2 fire stations, Blue Bonnet Park, and the original location of the tower 2 separate times, separated by multiple years. The applicant and the carriers have spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to make a site work that works on city property. And in fact, on multiple occasions when the city would request items or make proposals, the carriers were always agreeable and always provided what was requested. At some point, the city decided that none of those locations were feasible, and so the carriers and Vertical Bridge, who I represent, is the broker on the project, needed to move on and make other plans. And so that's what we have here. We found a willing landlord immediately to the south who was willing to lease some space on the manufactured housing lot that you're familiar with. And so that's the project that's in front of us today. Your package should have included, or does include, I believe, what are called propagation maps. I'm sure you're familiar with these. They indicate coverage in the area before and after the proposals. Now, we're in the odd situation here. Usually I'm in front of a board or a commission or city council talking about an area that's got a currently terrible coverage, and we're hoping to solve that problem by putting in a new installation that's going to answer that problem. Well, currently we've got great coverage. It could be better because those towers, temporary towers that are there, are not sufficient, are not structurally designed to hold some of the newer equipment that provides better and better coverage. But currently, we're addressing the needs of the area. And in fact, if you look at your packet, you can see that that coverage area stretches from the east end of the peninsula to the west end of the peninsula, and from Miller Road in the south all the way to Lakeview Parkway in the north. What we're trying to prevent here is if this application is denied, we're not able to build a tower here, is that's a community impacting thousands of residents whose cell service will be reduced to highly ineffective rates. Especially within commercial buildings, within homes, and within cars. Greater incidences of dropped calls, greater incidences of failed calls, and that includes 911 service. And if you're like me, you've likely dropped your landline and rely on your cell phone exclusively as the way you communicate. And so this is imperative and needed, necessary part of the infrastructure of the city to address the needs and 911 issues in the area. The staff indicated the 2 variances being requested really impact 2 locations: the shed on the owner's property and the city-owned property to the north. Now, the owners here The shed we have verified is on skids, and the owner is committed to move the shed the 2 or 3 feet south to get it out of the radius of the setback. So that issue really has been addressed. So we turn then to the city-owned property to the north. Fortunately, there are no structures within the setback that could be impacted by the tower. And the fall zone setbacks are actually not required for any other structures in the city of Rowlett. Not utility poles, not billboards, not water towers, not light towers, any other vertical structure. These fall zone requirements. So they're exclusively limited to cell towers. We understand that, and so we're asking for some relief in this particular situation. The variance provisions of the city code, as staff read, state that the variances are intended to provide relief from the requirements of this code in those cases where strict application of a particular requirement will create an unnecessary hardship prohibiting the use of land in a manner otherwise allowed under this code. As staff has indicated, we'll have to get an SUP from the city council, but this use is allowed on the property. And it goes on to read that it's intended to provide relief from the requirements of this code, render the land difficult or impossible to use because of some unique physical attribute of the property itself or some other factor unique to the property for which the variance is requested. So as I indicated before, the really unique geographic attribute of this property is that after 7 years of diligent work, tens of thousands of dollars, we have verified that this is the only parcel on the peninsula that addresses the coverage and capacity needs and meets the setback requirements with the exception of the relief we're asking for, and can ultimately have a tower constructed on it per the city code. Now the only exception to that is city-owned property. We've talked about that. We've really exhausted those opportunities. It seems the city's not interested in having a tower on their property, understandable. Moving in any direction doesn't work because this location is entirely surrounded by single-family residential. And as I indicated, if you look at that circle, if you move to the east, you're going to be constructing a new tower where no towers have been constructed before, and you're going to create the need for a second tower, a new tower, on the west side of the peninsula. Again, if you move to the west, you're going to move that circle out to the west, and you're going to need a new tower there and a second new tower on the east side of the peninsula. And so, fortunately, this piece of property is where it is and creates an opportunity to replace 2 existing temporary towers with 1 dynamic tower, well short of the height of the water tower that was there to address this need. The telecom regulations for the city of Rowlett establish the setbacks are for the following purposes, or excuse me, the regulations are for the following purposes: to protect and provide for the public health, safety, and general welfare of the city. Clearly addressing 911 coverage for thousands of residents and people that pass in that area addresses a public health, safety, and welfare concern. It goes on to say the intention is to enhance the ability of the providers of telecommunication services to provide such services to the community safely, effectively, and efficiently. Again, we recognize that fall zone requirements exist for a reason, but in this case, there are no structures, there are no utility lines, or no improvements whatsoever within the area that we're asking for relief in. And the property is not owned by an independent third party. It's in fact owned by the city. It goes on to say to provide regulations for antenna support structures and antennas that provide secure mounting and construction and prevent interference with public safety communications equipment. To encourage the users of support structures and antennas to co-locate where possible, and to locate all facilities to the extent possible in areas where adverse impact on the community is minimal. Again, we feel like we've done that here. The impact is, we in fact putting it in a location where towers have existed for over 40 years, and will be able to accommodate the 2 existing tenants, AT&T and T-Mobile, as well as there'll be space in the tower for a 3rd tenant should Verizon and someone, we all know those are the big 3, ever need to come on this tower. Again, if this is denied and other towers are needed, there's no guarantee that AT&T and T-Mobile will both need them in the same area. And so what we don't want to create is the need for 2 or even 3 towers to be constructed in new areas that currently don't have towers. It goes on to say to protect and enhance the city's environment and aesthetic quality. As I mentioned before, the tower's been on this property for over 40 years. So we feel like this has been addressed. And so again, what we don't want to do is construct new towers where there currently aren't towers. And then to identify standards in order to ensure equitable treatment of providers and functionally equivalent telecommunications service areas. This proposal addresses the needs of 2 of the 3 major carriers and provides room on the tower should Verizon again need to co-locate with this tower. All the purposes of the telecom provisions of the city code are therefore met. And so we feel like that the spirit of the code has been addressed, and the public safety and the public interest of the city of Rowlett is met. The intent of the setback, as discussed by staff, is to consider the fall distance of any collapsed sections to prevent encroachment upon and damage to adjoining property, public streets, overhead utility lines, ground and pad mounted utility service. Again, the only property impacted here is city-owned property where there are none of those structures that I've mentioned. We've reached out to the surrounding property owners, and we understand that one resident in the area has expressed his opposition based on the fact that he says that the tower shouldn't be in residential areas, and it has raised RF safety concerns. Well, a tower has been in this area for over 40 years, and so we feel like, in fact, this will declutter the viewscape and make this a more attractive installation than currently exists. 3 of the 4 property owners within 200 feet of the proposed tower have in fact expressed their support, and the 4th property owner is the city of Rowlett. And so we're hoping we have your support tonight. The same logic that really allowed the city to approve the temporary approvals years ago should apply here. The public need for wireless coverage, and especially 911 service, outweighs the considerations for a fall zone setback that doesn't impact any structures and only impacts raw land. The proposal will have very little practical development impact on the city-owned property and doesn't impact any structures. It's not clear what the city will eventually do with this property, but this setback or this impact within the property should be simple to design around. Ultimately, we're just replacing 2 existing towers with 1 tower and cleaning up the visual space in the area. Because the city has not agreed to multiple other city-owned properties, and because the proposed location is the only non-residential parcel that adequately addresses the coverage and capacity needs of AT&T T-Mobile, a denial would have the effect of prohibiting the provision of personal wireless service to the citizens of Rowlett in this area. And that's something we just want to really want to avoid. I'm happy to address any questions. I've got other representatives of the applicant here. If there's a question I can't adequately field.
This time, open it up for questions from the board.
I have several questions I was going to ask here. So regarding this is a telecommunications tower. I know you're talking about building codes being in respect to the Rowlett building code for telecommunications. Has any FCC requirements for offset distances from telecommunication antennas and dishes been addressed in this design?
I would have to defer to my colleagues on this, but I know that they're always a primary consideration, and I would assume that those have been adequately addressed. I mean, FCC, is that what you?
Yes, Federal Communications Commission regarding some of
Yes,
the
sir.
dishes and radios and stuff like that. All right. Within your design plans, I was looking at it here. So it shows where you have the pole located, you have what looks to be, I'm showing the brush sheet here for you. What looks to be about 20 feet from the center of the pole to the edge of your proposed 6-foot protective fence going around the antenna tower. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. As well as on one of the sheets, you talk about the requirement of the design. For all towers and equipment, shelters and cabinets shall be surrounded by a minimum 6-foot high decorated fence, wall constructed of brickstone, and then other materials are option 2, wrought iron fence, and then a landscape strip not less than 10 feet in width. Based on that wall design and everything what you're showing, you're already taking up most of the driveway of that main property entrance with this wall to get your offset spacing of 20 feet, as well as this wall doesn't show that 10-foot vegetative strip. If you were to include that, you'd have to eliminate the entire driveway. As access to property and the elimination of that access to property have been addressed through the city, as well as the residents that this would affect.
Are you talking about the access drive on the property that we
Yes. I'm looking at specifically the sheet LE-2.
Yes,
This is the one that shows your wall.
The owner is present. I can bring him up if you'd like.
Yes, no, I understand the owner's present, however, the residents on the property do not seem to be present. So that's what I'm addressing, is while the property owner can agree to this elimination of it, as well since the residents are also citizens of the city, elimination of access of their existing dwellings does need to be taken into consideration, and driveway permit modification does need to go through the city itself as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll certainly comply with all requirements the city have in terms of obtaining a building permit and any of the permits or approvals that are required. And it sounds like I'm hearing some mumbling behind me that there's in fact 2 access points to this property. And so while by eliminating one, the others maintained. Yes, that's actually, it looks like there's 3 access points to this property. Two to these particular residents. If you look at and I know this doesn't show up here, but this page here is part of your packet. You can see that there's a loop here, and you're right, that might encroach a bit into the access point on the north side, but there'll always be access on the south side of those manufacturing homes.
And I understand it will be addressed, but has that process of that driveway permit modification with the city been started yet?
I don't believe it's been started yet. We want to get past this hurdle before we initiate that.
Okay.
It sounds like there'll still be 12 feet of the drive that exists outside of the masonry screen wall and landscaping. So I'll check the
Include your
plans.
landscaping with 10 feet, and you have a 2-foot driveway left. I think that's less than the sidewalk. That's what I was asking. I was like, your own plan design doesn't seem to show, incorporate the total area of the square footage of this tower and surrounding, what we call shelter accommodations we require.
I'll verify with my client, but the good news is that we do have the access to the south that serves all of those same homes.
Yeah, while it would though, if you added that 10-foot landscape, the 2 properties just directly to the south would basically lose their driveways.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking about to the south of the manufacturing.
Yes, on it, yeah. There's a little bit backwards. I don't think I was. All right.
I'm going to introduce one of my colleagues, if I may, or have to introduce himself.
Yeah.
I'm Keith Mandowski, 228 Village Lane, Bartlett, Illinois. I represent Merkle Bridge. We'll be developing the tower site here. The object that's before you today is the tower location. We can modify it around equipment area. I can pull the fence south, or the wall south a little bit to get a layer of landscaping in there. I may not be able to get all 10 feet of it in there, but I think I can get 5 feet. I may have to stretch the west side of the mountain down a little bit to get some more square footage. The radio equipment that AT&T and T-Mobile and Verizon use has gotten smaller over the years. They've stopped using their big shelters, so I think I can make that modification to accommodate that request.
I'm just going to interject here a little bit. So right now we're just discussing the variances for the location of a tower, and anything related to site plan, landscaping, any of that is something that wouldn't be addressed by this body, but rather through the SUP process, which would only occur if variances are granted here. So I understand that there's a lot of interest in those things, but that's really not part of this board's decision tonight for the purpose of this meeting.
I did just verify that from what I understand, just to put you at ease, that I understand it's wrought iron and landscaping is one option, or masonry wall without landscaping. And we'll be doing the masonry wall, so the landscaping will be required, so we shouldn't impact the drive at all. So, but we'll verify that and make sure that we provide adequate access.
Any additional questions? I have one question I'd just like to clarify. You noted you were talking about the coverage quality. Is that based on the fact that the temporary towers are there?
That's correct. Currently, there's coverage because of those towers. Take those down. Yeah.
I do have one question for the city. Um, uh, Do you guys have planned intent for the little property? Is there anything going on with that property at the moment?
So I don't think that any of us here are able to speak to what the city may do in the future with any city-owned property. I would just say that, generally with city-owned property, the assumption would be that at some point it will either be sold for development, it will be, or this part of some future development. It could be used for critical infrastructure, for water, sewer, utility, whatever it may be, or for some other public need, which may involve either city staff or for something which brings the public to the site. So I know that it's sprawling right now. We don't know what that may look like in the future. That's really up to the city council in future years, and I don't think that we can speak to any plans. There's not a concrete plan right now that's been developed for the site. We can't speak to what they'd like to do there in the future, but I would say that when the decision was made for the city not to try to locate a permanent structure there, there were probably some conversations about what might happen there in the future. We just don't know. There wasn't anything that was like voted on or approved at that time.
Last question for the city. It was clear when they allowed the temporary towers to go up after the tornado, the city recognized the need for coverage in the area. But I also read in the packet that the city recognizes the desire for the community and the city to remedy the temporary towers. So what's the position of the city on wanting both, I guess?
So the city's position on this item, Martin can speak to this a little bit more, is who recommended denial of the variance request due to the potential impact on the future lot, because we don't know what might happen to that in the future. And it is an unknown right now. As to the need for coverage, we would love to try to find a way to work with them. I don't know if that is 1 tower, 2 towers, 3 towers. That's not something for us to say. I mean, that's part of this. It can certainly be part of your decision-making process here. That's why they're here to make the case to you about it. You definitely don't have to decide. Our staff recommendation, we're just giving you the recommendation based on our review of the submission. There has been some activity in Martin. I know there's there has been some complaint-driven, I guess, enforcement related to the code department related to these towers, that people would like to see the temporary towers done away with, gone in some fashion. So I think that's what kind of led to this. Okay, there's some sense of urgency that we need to get a permanent solution in place.
Correct. So,
I actually have a question. In theory, would it be possible for the applicant to purchase that land from the city? Theoretically, is that a possibility?
That's up to the city council.
But it's something that could happen.
I don't know if that conversation has happened before. I've only been here 2 weeks, I'm sorry.
All right, I'm just,
Has happened in the past?
I'm not saying that there are plans in the works, and that is a thing that could happen with that land. There's nothing
We don't
preventing.
know what is in the charter and what is in city policy regarding to city land yet. Sorry. I mean, theoretically, yes, but there may be something that's prevented that or would prevent that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, just to be clear, I guess, clear to anyone, on this land that's owned by the city, if this variance is passed, will that just preclude anything going on that land?
I think it would be difficult to have anything on there. We do have another site where we're looking at a site plan, which an old tower was built on there. And we actually did, it's changing their site plan because there's a bar radius on there, so there's potential for that to happen.
Thanks.
It would really put the onus on the city to work around their fall zone rather than them having to work around the city development because it's not in place yet.
Would I be able to address that question?
No, it's a great concern, and certainly I can't say it doesn't impact development on that property. That property has its own setbacks, and so this fall setback falls mostly within the setbacks that impact that property. So we view it as, again, it's convenient for this trust to reach this conclusion, is that it would have minimal impact on the developability of that property, plenty of other land acreage with which to operate and plan around. So that something else, some other use could be had.
If we have no other questions, I'd like to open up for any opportunity for the public to speak. If you'd like to speak, please come to the podium, provide your name and your address, and I would like to request per our board's rules, so you have 3 minutes to speak.
Keith Mendowski?
Oh,
you're voting.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead. We good? All right. Well, with that, we'll close the citizens' input. And at this time, I'd like to ask for someone to make a motion. Is there any motion?
A motion that we go to vote on this variance request.
Can you be more specific?
Our motion, we go to vote on the action item 4A for the variance request of the setback to be reduced.
Sorry, is your vote to approve or deny?
No, I'm making a motion that we bring to vote.
It has to be a vote for approval or a vote for denial.
Okay, sorry, a vote for approval for the setback request.
We have a second?
Okay.
All right. Now we vote. All right, the motion fails. Therefore, the request is denied. All right, with that, I'd like to move on to the second item on the agenda, which is agenda item 4B, discuss and take action regarding requests to the City Council for funding allocation for the Board of Adjustments for fiscal year 24-25.
So sorry to do this, I'm still trying to learn your processes here, I apologize. I would really appreciate on the former item, if we could either have a secondary motion, that would be a motion to deny, or a motion to approve or deny, or maybe approve a condition or changes or something like that, so we have something on the record for denial rather than just no action taken, because essentially we have a vote down on the motion to approve. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to ask for? Okay, so we never really got any discussion on whether we wanted to have any changes to what they requested or anything like that. So if you would like to talk further about maybe changing the request a little bit in terms of the distance, or if there's a motion to deny the request.
I think the motion was to approve. We voted, so I think it's, yeah. I guess we asked the question, is there anyone on the board that would like to make a request to make a change and then vote on that as an ulterior suggestion?
And I was going to say, I have no problem making a motion to request a change in that setback variance that they brought forward to us. If they could increase that setback, since they're already taking property area, I would have no problem bringing this variance back to the board.
I guess I'm not clear on, you're asking for them to increase the setback
Yes,
design?
yes, since they're already taking additional from their current design, they increased that setback further, so it would reduce the impact to the city's currently owned property. I would feel comfortable bringing this variance back forward to the Board of Appeals for approval, or vote approval, or vote denial again.
Do we need to request a specific distance, or is it just to request that we allow for alterations to the proposal?
So, I mean, the applicant can resubmit anything that they would like to in the future that can be considered by the board again. I was only asking for clarification because we essentially had a motion to approve and the motion failed due to the vote. So I believe that we should have a vote either to deny the approval, or to deny the request, or some discussion about maybe there's some way that you might approve it with changes to what the request was. One or the other, rather than just not taking any action, which is essentially what's happened by the failure of the vote on the first motion. I know this, it seems like, just voting down the motion to approve, but it really just procedurally is a different step.
All right, we'll ask for a request for a motion to deny the request.
I move that we deny the applicant's request for,
Oops. We need a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, so it's time to vote for denial of the request.
I'm sorry, if we want to deny it now, we press yes. That's where we're looking at.
Yeah, vote for yes
We
is,
want to approve it, we would press no.
that is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for the definition.
All right, the motion for denial has passed. So with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item. So we'll move to item 4B on the agenda, discuss and take action regarding a request to the City Council for funding allocation for the Board of Adjustments for fiscal year 24-25. All right, so somebody who's been on the board for a little bit here, I guess I'm a little confused. I didn't know what happened.
This is a new thing that the city council is doing this year, that the city is doing this year. So in previous years, the boards, and this is mostly for boards that do, programming and events and things like that, they have kind of a budget allocated. And that's usually built into the department that is kind of their staff liaison into the city budget. They're doing something different this year. They've asked for the boards to come in and request funding or to submit a request for funding. We can do that on your behalf, or you can send somebody to come to our meeting. We have a full budget workshop with the city council on Monday where this will be considered. I think we have a little bit of, leeway if we can't get to final numbers here on stuff. We can try to do some research and work on things later prior to the meeting, but they would like to know any requests for funding, whether that be for training or, some sort of event or programming that you want to do. If you want to name tags, t-shirts, anything like that that the board might want. We have not had a P&Z meeting to discuss it with them, but we did talk kind of offline with them, and they're requesting some funding for training to attend their Texas APA conference, which is in Allen later this year, and or maybe some funding for training to bring somebody in to do some kind of basics of the role, what to do and what not to do, where we get in trouble for decisions or that sort of thing. So I don't know if that's something that you as a board would like to potentially request. If you have any ideas for that or anything else that you would like to do, this is really, it's up to you, but we're happy to provide whatever guidance we can.
Yeah, so I guess our name tag, again, probably see this as a good example. Our name tag's always been provided. Is that something that now needs to be considered as a budget item? Or is that just covered by general city budgets?
We're asked to include all expenses related to the boards in this, just so that, I think this is just a step toward more transparency with the city with where we're spending money. So if we're spending money for each of the boards, even if it's, minimal like that, we will include it in the board budget request.
Okay.
Maybe we can allocate $5,000 for bags.
You don't have that?
I don't know how much the badges cost. They've always been provided by the city, we never had to pay for them.
So if there are specific items or things that you would like for us to include, we don't have to have dollar amounts tonight. If you want to give us a list of what you would like to include, then we can, after the fact, work on the list of expenses, or work on the detail of the expenses related to whatever this request might be.
I'm just saying, I've never known us to spend a dime on anything. Unless they, like I said, unless they want to charge us for badges, in that case, we would be that.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have Susan, who guided this board for so long, probably spend a lot on us that we didn't know. I know we used to have the work session where we had food available. Again, badges, who knows what we're actually spending. So If there's somebody that maybe has a little history of the behind the scenes operations that could help out, I think that would probably be wise for us.
Okay. Is there any interest in obtaining any training, whether that be bringing in somebody to do some training or attending trainings?
I think we've actually mentioned this before, it'd be nice to have a training on the actual system itself we're using for like voting, everything. In case somebody has to fill in for the chairman. I don't know if that's actually costing money or just like a 30-minute session before one of our meetings where just sit down and show everybody the process. We had that issue before, so man, fill in, it's a struggle.
I don't know that we need to allocate money for that, but we will find who the experts are and we'll try to get you some training.
Is the Open Meetings Act training, is that a cost to the city that we need to consider?
It's usually no charge for that.
Yeah.
It would just be if you wanted more specific to like getting into the weeds of planning and your variances and that sort of thing. Or your other rules, your building standards, or rules, or that's, I'm not sure how well versed you are in your rules and what the code says, so.
Well, I was gonna say, would there be an opportunity for planning to perhaps, share with the board the zoning map for the city? Maybe meet with them and understand kind of what the long-term plans are, like the commercial zones, all that kind of stuff. Just maybe have an understanding of, bigger picture plans based on the zoning maps.
Present on a comp plan, comprehensive
I
plan.
was gonna say, usually we have a comprehensive plan.
Sure.
Sure. In fact, that piece of land that this antenna was going to reach over, in the comprehensive plan, not just because it's on the comprehensive plan, it doesn't read the council.
We can definitely try to figure out a way to break that down maybe into segments and do some short little training sessions before your meetings when they're going to occur or something like that.
Then again, probably all in-house, right, so probably not a real cost.
I think for those topics, definitely, I think we could probably handle that in-house.
Is there a chance for any type of small funding for, because all the time there's packets of things, we like to keep them for meeting minutes and everything, something that like actually fancy weather portfolio or something we can keep packets in and bring to them from the meeting. That was, we have something that we can keep our documents that we use during these meetings there.
Just like general binders, some sort of
Yeah.
organized here.
Yeah.
Also, periodically I asked Jackie or whoever's going to be here next month, I know Jackie got a room trip, but ask them to print the packet for us. Does that need to be included in that?
No, we'll continue to do that for anybody who requests it. We don't know who's gonna join next week, either, or next time, next meeting. Jackie leaves us next week.
She said she should be across the street.
I'll pop in where to find her.
I can't think.
Any other requests you want us to consider?
I can't think of anything either.
You guys are a really easy bunch, it might be hard to say no to your bunch of requests.
All right, with that, I guess we'll close out discussion on 4B. At this time, we can adjourn the meeting. The meeting time is 7:19. Thank you all.